There we go. So now everybody, all right, everybody has the warning. So beautiful. So everybody smile, okay, and only nice things. So right now in the fourth chapter of the book of Judges, we did the last three. The first two really set up the backdrop of post Joshanian era, so to speak, after Joshua passes away, and gives us a little bit of a background of how the Jews were settling, the Israelites were settling in the land, and that all the strangers that were still amongst the Israelites were not yet gotten rid of or pushed out. So they still remained among the Israelites, and they started to be a thorn on their side. And finally, chapter 3 really gets to the theme of this book, which is really that the Israelites fall off the beaten path. They cry out to God for help and for salvation, and God sends them salvation in the form of as we call them, judges, shoftim, which again is not necessarily that they were judges. You can see it in two different ways. Not necessarily that they were literal judges. Some of them were, but in terms of they were bringing forth God's judgment, and part of that is also how God forgave them. And so we were introduced to three. The first one was Otniel, who was followed by Ehud, and then Shamgar. All right, so we had those three, with Shamgar really. Otniel was there for 40 years. Shamgar was there for 80. Otniel was there for 40 years. Ehud was there for 80 years, and Shamgar was roughly there for 1 year. And so Shamgar is really, so to speak, a very little. There's not much written about him, as you can tell. It's just really one pasuk, the last one. Okay, so let's continue with chapter 4. Vayosifu b'nei Israel la'asot hara b'nei Adonai ve'Ehud met. And so we're going to go back a little bit, not to Shamgar, but Ehud, the last shofet that was there for a while. So the Israelites again continued to sin, continued to do offensive act towards God, that which was in God's eyes unpleasant, and Ehud passed away. So in other words, there is nobody there to help them. So what does it do? Vayim kerem Adonai. So God sells them, so to speak, or surrenders them, beyad Yavin melech Canaan, but to the hands of Yavin, the king of Canaan, asher malach bechatzor. Remember that name, Bechatzor. He was reigning. His kingdom was centered in Chatzor. Visar Tzva'o, and this guy's general was Sisra. And that was the guy's name. The general of Yavin's army was Sisra. Vehu Yoshev becharoshet hagoim, and Sisra's domain, Sisra's headquartered, was in Charoshet hagoim. And shortly we will see a map to see where all this comes together. Vaitzaku, here is the formula. They sinned. They're getting punished, the Israelites. Vaitzaku v'nei Israel el Adonai. The Israelites cried out to God. Ki teshameot rechev barzelo, for Sisra had 900 metal chariots. Vehu lachatz et bnei Israel bechozaka esrim shanam. And he oppressed Israel ruthlessly for some 20 years. Okay, so the important thing, why, by the way, is it important about his Rechev Barzel, his chariots? So we mentioned the chariots in the olden days were really like the tanks, but in this case, you will shortly see that, did you notice on the second verse, where is Yavin located? In Chatzor, and Sisra is located in Charoshet Hagoim. So let me show you this.
That's like
They at war? Were they at war or going into war?
No, not yet. Wait. So let me show you. I'm just going to show you quickly, and we're going to go back to these, okay, later. So I'm going to spotlight with this. Here's Chazor. You see Chatzor up on top?
Yeah.
That's where the king Yavin is. You see Charoshet right here? There's another star. Charoshet, this is where Sisra is located. You see the distance? It's quite a big distance. And so those 900 chariots would enable them to move around the land much, much, much quicker. If it was by foot, it would take the same amount of time as somebody can run away. But obviously by chariot, it would be much faster. So in other words, they were mobile as well. Okay, so it's interesting. Chazor, it's up north. That's where that's the king. And here we have Charoshet here, okay? And Charoshet Hagoyim as well. This is where it is. Let's continue, okay? Sorry, let's continue. All right. Tell me if you recognize this. Udvora Isha Nevi'ah, and Dvora was a prophetess. Eshet Lapidot, she was the wife of Lapidot. He Shoftat Israel Baidahi, she led. You notice it says led. It doesn't say necessarily that she was judging, but she was leading, she was judging, she was, by example, the Israelites at that time. The first time that we have Isha Nevi'ah, except we have Miriam as well in the Torah, but in this part of history, this is the first mention of a Navi. Up until now, we read the entire book of Joshua, no mention of a Navi. We had 3, no mention. This is the first time we have this mention of Naviut, of prophecy. V'hi yoshefet tachat tomer, she used to sit beneath a palm tree. It's actually called Tomer Devorah, the palm tree of Devorah, and it was situated Bein Harama uvein Beit El Behar Ephraim. It was situated in between Ramah and Beit El, up in the mountainous region of Ephraim. Vayalu alea bnei Israel mishpat, and the Israelites would go up to her for her leadership and for her decisions. In other words, it could be both in terms of literal litigation or legal affairs, or she was there to help solve problems. I can guarantee you that she would not, as alone, would not be able to. We just had, by the way, this section, Udvorai Shanev V'Ya'eshit Lapidot, is the beginning of the Torah section of Bishalach, which we just read 2 weeks ago. So this is the first section, the opening section of the Ashkenaz of the Haftarah, and as well this last week's parsha was Yitro, which dealt with the judicial system that Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, saw being performed by Moses. He saw the way that Moses was handling the people, and he's the one who actually helped them set a set of court and a set of a legal structure that would be able to sustain itself. He saw that Moses would not be able to handle a lot alone. So imagine now, do you think Dvorah can handle all the legalities of that time alone? Certainly not. So she most likely either dealt with really pressing cases or things that mattered the most to the people. In other words, things that were critical, not the little, just little petty things. So it's very important to understand that. Now, let me show you. So this is a cute little map. Do you see Bethel?
No.
I just made a circle.
Yeah, but there's no map.
There's no map?
No.
I'm sorry.
It's a nice circle.
All right. Does anybody see the map now?
Yes.
Yes,
Beit El.
but no, sir. There's the circle.
There's a circle, Beit El. Okay. So she Beit El Uvena I. Do you see I? So somewhere down here in the middle, in between those two, is where she was. You see it? Ben Beit El Uvena I. Okay.
Yeah.
You see it?
Uh-huh.
So she was sitting there somewhere there. That was her area. I'll show you later on, maybe not this lesson, but I'll actually show you a map and you'll see where all the different judges were actually centered, or where they were centralized. Where they're, it's not like every prime minister's is out of Ottawa, or every president is in Washington D.C., or in Israel now the prime minister is out of Jerusalem. No, every judge was based in a different place, and you'll see it was all over Israel. And I think that there was a reason for that. Anybody want to come up with a reason?
Well, that's the hill country, and tanks or chariots are not very effective.
Okay, excellent. But I'm saying, why do you think judges were
For safety.
from all over? No, all over Israel. Why do you think? Not just in one place. Let's say they didn't have a central government, so to speak.
So they
Well-
wouldn't be biased?
Okay, I think close to that. I think so that way everybody's represented. So it's not just from one place. Don't forget that the land is divided into regions, right? So this way everybody has represent, so it's all over. Plus, this is also a way of, if you remember the cycle of sinning, getting punished, and getting help, and falling back and again. There was no way of internet or spreading the word, so to speak, of following God's word. The way it was this region was then, this region later, that region next, so that way, at least hopefully, everybody felt that they had some leadership, and that the shofet or shofetet would actually dissuade the people. And at that point, even when they pass away, that region at least would stay calm, would not sin again. And then the next region would not. So the idea of coverage, I think, was very important in understanding that the way that they were able to move around during that time. And I want to show you. So this is what Beit El kind of looks like today. There's or at least some kind of archaeological digs around Beit El, and Beit El is of course a very, very famous and a critical and an important place where a lot of things happen. So perhaps the first thing that was significant was Jacob's dream. Remember with the ladder? That was where it happened. Bethel was also where the ark was first rested. So it was somewhere quite important that had religious significance. Now it's near Bethel. Right now is near what is an Arab village called Beitin, okay, which is about 20 miles north of Jerusalem. And the actual Bethel, or most of it, is actually buried beneath the modern Arab village, okay? But around the vicinity and in different places where there's archaeological digs, some very interesting things have been found. I want to show you this. Anybody want to guess what this is?
The cave of Machpelah?
No. So that's in another city. That's in Hebron. This is also in the Bet El region, okay? So today there are really very little or almost no visible remains of the biblical Bethel. But the summit of Artas, which is 1 mile north of this little town of Beitin, there's some interesting finds. Facing north is a big stone platform framed by a stone wall forming a rectangular shape. And this is actually where experts say that the Yerabam's temple was built. We'll get to that later. That's another book. Okay, but needless to say, I say this just to show you that Bethel was somewhere that was significant. Next to this temple is a Muslim shrine called Maqam Sheikh Abdallah, which is what you're seeing in the picture. It is built over a chapel from the Crusaders' time. And by local tradition, the chapel used to mark the site of Jacob's dream. This is where locals believe that Jacob actually slept and had that, okay? And by the way, the interesting thing also is people think of mountainous regions, seeing the Taris either really, really north, or if the site here provides also one of the best panoramic views in all Israel. The coastline, the Jordan Valley, the mountains of Moab, and even the Mount of Hermon are visible from here. So it's quite open, and soon you'll see why, okay? So this is Bethel. Bet El region, if you want to look at it, looks something like this. So there's quite a few Israelis who are now living around the area. It's a popular area, beautiful, beautiful area. Can you see how clear you can see out?
Yeah,
Do you see how beautiful it is? Nothing impels the view, or impedes, I should say, the view. And here, by the way, as I left this, these are some of the projects going up in Bethel. And you're talking about, like, I don't want to say what we would consider really out there, like a hick town, so to speak. And look at the projects that are going up. This is not near, it's not far from Haifa, etc. But this is not, it's its own municipality, and there's quite a bit of development, really beautiful development. Okay. So just to give you a little bit of Bethel. Let's continue. So she's sitting under Tomer Dvorah, under this palm tree named Devorah for her, and she's making decisions. She's helping guide the Israelites. Vatishlach, and so she sends and summons Vatikra leVarak ben Avinoam. She calls Barak, the son of Avinoam, Mikedesh Naphtali, from Kedesh, which is in Naphtali. That's the region. Does anybody remember where Naphtali is? Where is the area of Naphtali? I see Henry's going to pull out. So I'll show you shortly, okay? So she sends out to Barak, who is situated in Kedesh, which happens to be under the territory of Naphtali. Vatomer elav, and she calls out to him and she says, Halot tziva Adonai Elohei Israel. This was what God, the Lord of the Israelites, has commanded. Lech, go, umashachta behar Tavor, and you shall march up Har Tavor. Velakachta imcha, and you should take with you aseret alafim ish, take with you 10,000 men, mibnei Naphtali, umibnei Zvulun. Take with you an army of 10,000 people, 10,000 made up of people from the Shevet Naphtali and Shevet Zevulun. So let me show you. So this is Naphtali. So do you remember we saw Chazor, where the king was? The king was here, roughly. Roughly, I'm drawing it. If I'm not mistaken, right here is Charoshet Hagoyim. Here is Kedesh. Okay. Bet-El is here. Look at that. Ben Bet-El Ben I. Remember that? So she's somewhere here. So she goes, she summons him to go up to Har Tavor. This is what Mount Tavor looks like. Look where it is. It's right here. Do you see it?
Yeah.
And right here, by the way, right down south here somewhere is Kedesh. All right. And right here, roughly in this area, is where Sisra is, and this is where the king that is oppressing the Israelites is centered around. Okay? Does everybody see that?
Mhm.
And so if you want to look, let me just undo it. So you have here 10,000 people from Naphtali and 10,000 of Zvulun. That's what he's told to take, okay, from those regions. Why, by the way? Why that region?
The fight against
Because that's the hardest being hit and being oppressed by the king, because that's where he's centered. Obviously, he's not thinning himself out and going down to Shimon or somewhere else, or Reuven or Menashe. He's in this region. He's causing a lot of the havoc, and plus, again, to arrange 10,000 people, you can't start, right? You have to use somebody from the people who are nearby. Okay. So let's continue.
Can you lower the radio and TV, please?
Okay. And she continues to tell Sisra, what I will do is, and this is God is this is Dvorah speaking kind of in the name of God. Okay, Umashachti alecha al Nachal Kishon, and I will draw from Nachal Kishon, El to the river of Kishon, at Sisra Sar Tzevayavin. I will draw to that region where you're waiting for him near Tavor, near Mount Tavor. I will draw Sisra, the army general of Yavin, ve'etrich bo v'tameno, and all of his chariots and all of his men and all of his army, untatihu be'adecha, and I shall deliver him in your hands. And so Barak answers her. Vayomer le'ah Barak. Barak tells her, Im telchi mi ve'halachti. Dvorah, if you come with me, I will go. V'im lo telchi mi lo elech. However, if you decide not to come with me to battle, I will not go. What does this sound like? Please go. Just unmute yourself, Esther, if you want to speak.
He doesn't have faith in her and in God.
100%, right? He's saying, "Oh, I'll only go if you come with me. You know, if you do it, I'll do it." That's what he's saying. All right. So what did she tell him? Vatomer haloch elechimach. I will go with you. Dvorah says. Efes, however, no, just no. Ki lo tihye tifartecha al haderech asher taholech. Now, no, because of your cowardice, the greatness or the deliverance will not be by your hands. Ki beyad isha, for in the hands of a woman, yimkor Adonai et Sisra, God will deliver Sisra. Vatakom Devorah, vatelech im Barak kedesha. And she goes up with Dvorah. Dvorah goes up with Barak, and she goes towards him back to Kedesh. That's where Barak is, up there, just south of the Sea of Galilee. Vayazek Barak et Zvulun vet Naphtali. And Barak, Yazek is literally yells out to them or musters them. He wakes them up. There's Zvulun and Naphtali, Kedsha. He calls them to come up to Kadesh. Vaya'al beraglav aseret alfei ish batal imod Dvorah. And 10,000, he was able to amass an army of 10,000, and now they're climbing up the mountain. Okay, so they're from Kadesha, and they're going up towards Har Tavor. And now this is, by the way, that's act number one. Now we're moving kind of the camera angle changes, and we're heading off to another character. V'chever hakeni nifrad mikain, and Chever, the Canaanite, separated from the other Canaanites. In other words, he did not want to follow, he separated themselves. Mibnei Chovav choten Moshe, from the descendants of Chovav, who was the father-in-law of Moshe. So these are people who have some kind of relationship with the Israelites. Vayet aholo ad elon betza ananim asher et kedesh. And he pitched his tent at Elon Bezananim. That's another place, which is not far from Kedesh. All right. Does everybody? Now we're introduced to another player who actually was not living among the Canaanites. He was alone. Vayagidu le Sisra, and suddenly we're going back again to Sisra. Vayagidu le Sisra, ki ela Barak ben Avinoam ha'ar Tavor. They told Sisra that Barak has gathered some kind of a presence up on Mount Tavor. So in retaliation or in response, Vayazek Sisra et Richbo, so Sisra summoned up all his chariots, Chameot Rechev Barzel, 900 metal chariots, iron chariots, Vet Kol Ha'am Asher Ito, as well as all the troops that were with him, Mecharoshet Hagoyim El Nachal Kishon. So in other words, he rather than going up the mountain, as by the way, you know what happens, right? Does anybody know in terms of strength, right? The upper always has the up, right? In battle, always on top is a much stronger position than to being on the bottom. And we know that air supremacy will how do you call it? The higher you go, the more power that you have, because there's less mobility on the ground or anything, spheres that are below you. So here we have Mount Tavor. I'm going to show you again what Mount Tavor looks like. It's actually quite gorgeous. So note how dramatic it is. It's literally like a pimple. It looks like a pimple. It's flat all around and just a round mountain in the middle. That's what Har Tavor looks like. All right. Now let me show you what region is really under question. So that way you'll understand. He traveled from somewhere around here. This is Sisra. He traveled this way. Sorry, he traveled roughly to this position right here. Okay? Somewhere down here. There is a street in Beit Sha'an known as Nachal Kishon. So it has to be, the Nachal was somewhere here, that river or that little wadi. Okay? Somewhere around here. Does everybody see it? So this is really the region where we're going to get hot.
Which is up here in the other place.
Pardon?
It's higher up in terms of the one on the other map. I'm looking at where that is it's north, right?
Where's north?
This Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
And this on the left side of this map, there's another map. So it's a
Yeah.
little,
So we're looking roughly at this area right here.
yeah, that's what I mean.
That's it. That's this map right here.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Haifa is here. Haifa is down here. And Haifa
Gives
is
me-
here. You see it?
Yeah, I understand.
Roughly that's the area. Okay.
Mhm.
Maybe even a little bit higher. But something of that nature. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's everybody get it. Do you know kind of where you are in Israel, by the way?
Mhm.
You're about 30 miles or so, 40 miles north of Jerusalem.
On the way to Haifa, no?
Well, not quite. North. Haifa is northwest. Like here, let me show you here back again. Jerusalem is here. This is where Haifa is. This is where roughly here is where we're going to have the battle. Okay, the battle is here. Or this is where right now we're situated. All right, Sisra travels to somewhere here. Haifa is this way on an angle. This is literally just north, due north, following almost the Jordan River. Okay,
Mhm.
going straight up, straight above Jerusalem. That's where we're going. Okay,
Yeah.
let's continue. Excellent. So he's going to Nachal Kishon. Vatomer Dvorah el Barak. And Dvorah summons and charges Barak. Kum, get up, start moving. For this is the day that God has delivered Sisra in your hands. Halo Adonai yatsa lefanecha. Can't you see? Or look what's in front of your eyes. You can see that God has been playing a hand and has already created the situation, has unfolded it for you before you. And Vayered Barak mehar Tavor. Barak charges down from Mount Tavor. Vaseret alafim ish acharav. And behind him are 10,000 men. Vayahom Adonai et Sisra. Ve'et kol harechev ve'et kol hamachane lefi cherev lifnei Barak. And the Lord threw Sisra, or stunned, Vayahom, they were stunned, they were blocked. Sisra and all the chariots and all the army into a panic before the onslaught of Barak. Vayeret Sisra me'al hamerkava vayanos beraglav. And in desperate action, Sisra just gets off his chariot and he starts running by foot. Uvarak radaf acharei harechev ve'acharei hamachane. Barak pursued the chariots and all the soldiers ad charoshet hagoim, So they went back home. That's where they started. They came back from. So now they're fleeing back to their army base. Vaipol kol machanes Yisrael lefi cherev lo nishar ad echad. And the entire camp, the entire army of Sisra falls by the sword. Lo nishar ad echad. No one left until one. So here they translated not a man left. In that particular war, in terms of minus Sisra, nobody was left of those men. But you can also read it, Lo nishar ad echad. None was left until one, except one. Who was the one? Sisra. And the same lingo, by the way, is used in Shirat Hayam when the splitting of the sea. When the sea goes back, it says Lo nishar bahem ad echad. None remained ad echad. And the commentaries say, some hold that it was actually Pharaoh survived and went back to Egypt to tell everybody what happened. Imagine the shame that he has to go back with nobody. Nothing's left for him. His kingdom just crumbled. So there are those commentaries that hold that not everybody, all the Egyptians drowned. Everyone except ad echad, one Pharaoh. In this case, we have the same lingo, lo nishar ad echad, and this time it's Sisra. Now we're going to go back to Sisra. Vesisra, nas beraglav, Sisra, meanwhile, is fleeing by foot, and he happens to come to El Ohel Yael, and he arrives at the tent of Yael. Who's Yael? Eshet Chever HaKeni. She is the wife of Chever the Kenites. Remember, we mentioned beforehand, we had one pasuk that suddenly mentioned to us right here, pasuk 11. Chever HaKeni nifrad mikain, that he lived alone. This guy named Chever, and so now it happens to be that as he's running. Sisra arrives at the tent of Yael, who's the wife of Chever HaKeni. And why does he even go there? Ki shalom ben Yavin melech Hatzor, for there's peace between Yavin, who is the king that has, which Sisra works for, uven beit Chever HaKeni, and the household of Hever the Kenite. So in other words, he sees somebody that is, so to speak, in peace with him, okay, or at least with the king. But Yael likrat Sisra, Yael recognizes who this guy is, and she goes out to him. She goes out to greet him. Vatomer elav, and she speaks to Sisra, and she tells him, Surah Adoni, Surah Elai al Tira. Come in, my lord, come in, do not worry. Vayasar elea ha'ohela, and he comes into her tent, vatchaseu basmicha, and she covers him with a blanket. Why does she cover him with a blanket?
She's trying to trick him.
Trick him in what way?
I don't know. He's a man coming into her tent.
He's cold and tired,
Okay.
Yeah, well,
fighting or running.
So I think it's a couple of reasons. Number one, to hide him, right? Where's she going to hide him? Under what? So she put a blanket. He's obviously wearing some kinds of war fatigues, right? Somebody put their head in, be very, very easy to see. So, and like Henry said, he's most likely tired, and he's just been running this traumatic experience of losing a battle, and he's just been running for who knows how long, for a couple of miles.
and how does she know who he is?
She recognizes him.
Oh, okay.
Vayomer eleha, and Sisra tells her, Hashkini na me'at mayim, please give me some water. I'm thirsty.
Okay.
Kitzameti, from thirsty. Vatiftachet and od hechalav, and she opens up the skin of milk. Vatashkehu vatchasehu, and she gave him something to drink, and she covered him again. Okay? Vayomer eleha, he tells her, Amot petach ha'ohel, please stand at the opening of the tent. V'haya, and should it be, im ish yavo shelech, ve'amar hayesh po ish, ve'amart ein. If somebody asks you, have you seen a man? Have you seen a stranger here? Pass by. please tell him, no, I haven't seen anyone. Vatikach Yael eshet chever. And so, by the way, she says yes. And in between the lines, between 20 and 21, should have been a verse 20a, but there isn't, as it's understandable. We read between the lines. He falls asleep, and what happens? Vatikach Yael eshet chever et yitad ha'oel. And so Yael, the wife of Chever, takes the tent pin, the post which holds down the tent, vatasem et hamakevet be'ada, and she grabs the mallet in her hands. Vatavo elav balat, and she came and approached him while he was out cold. Vatitka et hayated berakato, and she approaches him quietly and stealthily and drove the pin through his temple until it went down to the ground.
Oh my God.
Vaya'af v'hu nirdam, vaya'af vayamot, and he was sleeping, and he passed away in his sleep. V'hineh Barak rodefet Sisra, and Barak, after finishing and wiping out the entire Sisra army, realizes who's missing. Who's missing? Sisra. Barak just finished off the army, and he's noticing the general, the head guy, is not there. So obviously he starts pursuing, trying to finding where is Sisra. But Tetzei Yael likraton, Yael actually goes out towards him, Vatomerlo, and she says, Lech ve'areka, come and I will show you something. I will show you who? Et ha'ish asher ata mevakesh, that person which you are trying to look for, you're trying to find. Vayavo eleha, and he approaches her. Ve'hineh Sisra nofel met vayated berakato, and there is Sisra lying dead, and the tent pin is running through his temple. Vayachna Elohim bayom ahu et Yavin melech Canaan lifnei bnei Israel. And that day, God subdued the king Yavin of Canaan before the Israelites. By the way, why suddenly he beats Sisra? Why did suddenly is there Yavin? What's the connection? Very simple. The army just fell. The king or not king, right? You don't have anybody to protect you. Your army is is gone. There's nobody. Forget about just protecting, but there's nobody to go to battle for you. So obviously, the king Yavin is subdued. Vatelech yad bnei Israel haloch vekashe, and the hand of the Israelites bore harder and harder al Yavin melech Canaan, on Yavin, the king of Canaan, ad asher yichritu et Yavin melech Canaan, until they finally destroyed and wiped away Yadin, the king of Canaan. And I want to show you right now. That was the first.
Yosi,
Yes.
am I unmuted? Oh, yeah,
Yes.
I am. Is that the first time a woman has killed a man in the Bible?
Is that the first time? I have to let me think. That is.
I mean, not that I know the Bible so well, but quite a
It's
move.
at least, yes. It seems like at least somebody in power that kills. Yes, I would have to agree with you there. I'm sure it happened before, but yes, this is 100%. So I want to show you kind of again the battle pattern. Okay. So number one, let me show you here, and then maybe I'll go right over it. So we start the story right here. Ben Beitel uven Beit, right here. This is where Dvorah is. She goes and summons. She summons who? She summons Barak, who's in Kadesh, and then she travels with him to Kadesh. So now they're here. Okay. Then they gather 10,000 people and march up to Har Tavor right here. All right. So that's Sisra. That is Barak and Dvorah, and they're up there with 10,000 men. When Sisra hears, He's in Charoshet Hagoyim right here. He marches, tak, 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 marches to roughly here, which is Nachal. All right. Remember, I showed you kind of on just to the right, and starts to march towards the mountain. As they are fighting, who comes down? Boop, boop.
Barak.
Barak. If you remember, Chever Hakeni lives near Kadesh. Somewhere here is where Chever, or around somewhere around in this vicinity, around is where Chever lives. At one point, Sisra takes off by foot. Any idea why that direction? Why that direction?
Mhm.
So number one, because he knew Chever was there. He definitely knew that he had allies living here. Number two, it's close towards what area? Back to the kingdom. Knowing that the army is going to be beaten, why would he go back to the base, right? Does that make sense?
You
say so.
In the meantime, as the battle is going sour, the troops of Sisra start going towards this way. They're fleeing back towards their headquarters. This is where Barak chases them down, tak, 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 and wipes them out. And now he's looking for Sisra. So he tracks back towards Sisra. And I guess, we don't have all the middle information, but he makes himself, he tracks him down near Kadesh. And that's where he finds him. Somewhere around here. This is where, so that's really, if you want to look at the battle, that's kind of how it unfolds. And I don't know if you know, but this is very interesting. Has anybody seen this painting?
No.
Anybody seen this painting? It's a very famous painting. It's actually right now in Museo del Prado. Who knows where Museo del Prado is?
In Spain.
In Madrid, Spain. So this painting is there. It was a painting made by Luca Giordano, who lived from 1634 till 1705. And he was an Italian late Baroque painter. And this is, he was actually a painter, a printmaker, and in etching. And he created very, there are many Bible, but it's very romanticized. You can see like the angels in the hand of God, and even the death. Everybody is almost like acting. The horse, it's very romanticized. But this is a painting of Sisra's chariots, and Sisra's men being defeated by Barak. And you can actually see it in Museo del Prado. If you actually Google Luca Giordano, you'll see some paintings that you may have seen in, or at least that style, at some point. And it's very interesting how, of course, the idea of help God. Notice what's coming out of the angels. You see the angel on the left?
She's a warrior.
No, but notice what's coming out of here. I thought that was very interesting.
Oh. That's it.
Not big enough. To see.
What?
It's not big enough to see.
It's not big enough to see? Let me,
Looks like a flash of light.
yes, that's what I see.
Okay.
What do you see that?
She's out to do some damage.
Yeah, it looks almost like Thor. But this is the depiction, by the way, of Yael. You see, that's a depiction of Yael. Does anybody notice what she has in her hand?
Got a knife, I'm sure.
Mallet
Mallet.
and
The screw or
the
nail.
tent pin. You see the tent pin?
Oh.
So she's kind of the angelic, and again, that to me is very. I think that's hints to who else Kikaran or Panav, whose face shined,
Well,
whose forehead shone.
Moshe?
Moshe, that's correct. Moshe's what visually what can that display? What was that? What is that brightness? What is that?
It was Hashem.
Right. So Nevuah, that's his connection with God. That's his ability to prophesize. And what did we read about Dvorah? That she was a prophetess, and hence, if Yael also had some kind of vision, because she knew who Sisera was, but she knew what to do with Sisera. She didn't save him without being instructed, without being told. What does she do? She takes matters into her own hand. She becomes the heroine, and she follows actually the prophecy which Dvorah tells Barak, right? She tells Barak, go and kill him. He chickens out, and he says, no, unless you go. If you go, I'll go. And what does Dvorah tell him? Because of that, because of your hesitance, God will deliver Sisera in the hand of a woman. And hence, that to me is indicative of that. In other words, she had she had the foresight. She had some kind of inspiration, godly inspiration, to perform that act. I think that's reveled by that. That's revealed by that light coming out of her forehead. And
It looks partly male, female.
It could be Barak. You're right, but it can't be, because it wasn't Barak that very clear in the text. But you're right. But I think in those days, I think even if you look, I don't think their ideal woman was a 195-pound woman that is sickly and skinny. I think they were more
In the
healthy.
army.
They were healthy-ish, that's what. And the reason why is because if you look at what the clothing of the ladies, as opposed to the other ones, they're wearing much more garb stuck to their pants. They're wearing a shirt. They're wearing how do you call it, steel protective gear. Do you see it? It's not loose. And here you have these angelic figures, which are women. Also, and this has to be a woman as well, in my opinion. Even though you're right, I mean, those arms are quite. I mean, Yael in those pictures was definitely working out.
Yeah, she used to go.
Yosi, is Yael ever mentioned again in the Bible?
No, that's
And
Yael. No.
is she rewarded for what she did?
We'll find out. We'll find out in how do you call it? We'll find out in the coming weeks. Because the next week is actually, let me just show you. So that's the that's the defeat of Sisera, as I mentioned, and you can go and see it in Museo del Prado.
Let's go.
Pardon?
Let's go.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
the next trip.
Yeah, Yosi will take us.
That's it.
Eh.
On my motorcycle.
Oh, we'll organize a trip. We'll go.
Okay. The next chapter is the continuation of what happens after this battle. I don't want to show it to you. This story comes, and this is partly the reason why there is always a parallel between Haftarot and the Torah portion. As we did when we did the Haftarot at one point, you always saw parallel of some kind. And you will see next week when we'll delve into a little bit more why this is the Haftarah that we read on Beshalach, which was read 2 weeks ago on Shabbat. So that's Shabbat Shira. Yeah, that's a hint a little bit. Shabbat Shira. Yes, Esther, and just unmute yourself, please, because
I
otherwise.
just wanted to tell you, I was at Prado, and one of the things I remember, besides all the beautiful art that I saw, they had guards there that were very intimidating. I mean, it was just tourists and people, students and so on there, but they were walking around with big rifles and very formal uniforms. And I remember the hats they had, they looked like plastic, but they were not, black. I said to Sydney, be careful, because I saw the guy tell him, you're too close to the wall. And he wasn't friendly when he said it, but the paintings are gorgeous.
You had a hammer and a mallet and a pin there to go after you.
That's right.
Yeah. You know
Very
what?
intimidating.
I actually, I was also there in 1992, so a couple of moons ago. And I have to say, unfortunately, to my detriment, I didn't really have an appreciation of or know really what treasures, if we can say, are or appreciate, you know, and when you're whatever 18 years, we went there, it was cool because everybody heard of Museo del Prado, but I didn't
Yeah.
necessarily, I can't say that I was, it was not really the proper time for me to go in terms of, I was there with a friend of mine as well. It's not like we were there with a family that might, you know, somebody's guiding me or whatever. And there were other more interesting things to see at that age around Madrid and etc. But I remember staying not far away when we stayed in the city, and the Jewish presence is almost like hidden. You don't see, you know, anybody visibly. Obviously, we're walking with hat, and we're walking by it on the way to the museum. There's a storefront, and as we see the storefront in the corner on behind all these, it was like some kind of an antique store. It was actually, I believe it was on Shabbat when we were walking, and we look in, and there was this tiny small Chanukiah, a menorah for Hanukkah, and it looked quite old. I mean, I can't say it looked, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 years old, but it was very. It was not 10 years old or 15 years old or modern. It was a couple of decades old, if not a couple of centuries old. Some were stuck behind. There was even like a little, I remember there was like you can definitely tell there was either an olive branch or something. It was definitely a Jewish item of ritual use. It was not some kind of, you know, candelabra that, you know, somebody puts on table when they have a feast, so it looks like there's light. It was definitely religious in its use. And I remember we also saw a couple of other things in that store, and we were so tempted, except that it was Shabbat and it was closed. But we wanted to find out if maybe this is like one of these Muranos or some kind of connection with a Jew in hiding. But in any event, we found that very interesting. But I wish I could take that back and go back to the museum right now and hunt down that painting, and as well as others that are quite famous and worldwide known. So like I said, sometimes now I know what I'll tell my kids. If they happen to be somewhere, enjoy the moment, even you might not want it, enjoy the moment for what you are, because you never know when the next time you'll get that opportunity to go and visit it. So, but you know, you live, you learn, and at a certain stages in your life, you think you're the smartest and you know exactly what's interesting for you, etc. And then later on you realize, maybe I missed an opportunity, but God willing, I'll get my opportunity to go back there and see it again. So, any questions?
Yeah, well, I would just want to comment whether Yael was made famous because of what she did. Some people in the Bible are not as famous as others, like Yisro. He did a very important thing for Moshe, and we don't glorify him as we do others. So maybe I don't know how we do, but certainly Yael doesn't have as much credit as Esther. And maybe because she killed someone, and there's maybe a reason for that, even if it's an Oyev.
So I don't know if we can, the same way that we don't, I think, compare Nevi'im or compare, it's at that moment. Esther, by the way, what Yael did and Esther did are definitely two different similar actions on paper, but you know, one had the Esther had the entire nation in her hand.
Right.
Here was an army, he was one guy, but nonetheless, as if you join us next week, you will realize that she is glorified. She is her actions, and that is, and she's blessed. But you have to see that next week. You have also just the fact that Yael is such a common name of strength, name of positivity, name of beauty. My niece, my brother's daughter in New Jersey is named Yael. One of my best friends' daughter's name is Yael. Who knows if I'm not mistaken, Cantor Dworkin's wife was Yael, right?
Yes, of course, we know her.
So
Yes.
so there's Yael. that alone tells you whether that name is or that person was seen as a heroine. Just as we have somebody in this group named Esther. My mother's name is Esther. It's another name that is seen as not just a beautiful name, but there's strength and glory that is associated with certain names. And Yael is seen as a really beautiful and overtly a Jewish name. No, would you say Yael is Jewish name?
Yeah, Hebrew name, beautiful.
And it certainly is not. In the sense of if you look at the history, it's she was Yael Eshet, she was a Canaanite. She was not necessarily an Israelite, and it becomes synonymous with a Hebrew name, and I think that alone in itself tells you what it is. How many Baraks do you know?
Oh,
Very many.
in
No
Israel. In
There are-
Israel.
There
In
are Barak. We had a prime minister, right, who was Barak. But aside from that, besides from that, I can't. It's not a mainstream. It's not a mainstream name, Barak, by and large. It's not.
Ehud.
It's not a
Isn't
main.
that-
It's not. It's not like Yaakov. It's not like Yael. It's not like why? Because there's some kind of hesitance, even though, but what does the name Barak mean? What is Barak?
Thunder.
What?
Thunder.
No, that's Barak.
No, Barak is
Lightning.
Lightning.
lightning. It's lightning. That's a very powerful name. That's an electrifying name. I mean, if anything, but or I should say that name sheds a lot of light. But and yet it's not. It doesn't exude that kind of power that it should. What really is supposed to be after that strength. It almost kind of it's beautiful name Barak, but it's clear and yeah. If you just look at it, but in terms of how many Baraks do you know? How many religious people that know the Torah, that know the Bible, named their kids Barak? Zippo, I know of none. I know of none. None. Why? Because there is that sense of, I don't say cowardness, but hesitancy, because he did perform what he needed to perform, but he was only doing it if he had her protection. He knew that if Dvorah was with her, then that's fine. And that is also why the lesson is, what ended up happening? Why do you think by Barak not following her orders blindly, why was it important for another woman to deliver Sisra? Why couldn't you just say it would be delivered by someone else?
To humiliate him.
In what way?
Well, a woman was able to inspire the troops, and
So-
Barak was afraid to.
So a woman was not in that world, in that time, there were no women warriors. It was an army made of men. That's who went to battle, was men. Women
Right.
were not seen, right? If you attack the children, you attack the women, you attack the elderly, that was seen as attacking those vulnerable. That was not. Those were the conventions of war then. Women were not part of the battle. They were seen, for whatever reason. They didn't have the fortitude. And here you have a woman that doesn't need even Dvorah to tell her what to do, and she innately, so from position of weakness, so to speak, way overpowers Barak, making that name, making that kind of even further belittling, or should I say, sucking out even more of the power of the name of Barak. In a way, understand exactly what you're saying, showing that the woman did not even hesitate. She knew, Yael knew instantly. She recognized him. She knew exactly what to do. She didn't hesitate. And hence that name has so much power associated with it. No hesitation.
I'm going to tell my granddaughter that, because her name is in Hebrew is Yachel Chana. So
Yachel,
you put
Yael.
Yael. I said Yachel, I meant Yael. Yael Chana.
Yeah.
Two names. And one is the Chana is more soft and the Yael is and that's her.
And where does the name, what is the origin of Yael, the word? Anybody can figure it out?
Yael.
Well, ale
Ale is
is God.
Elohim. Elohim.
Pardon?
Elohim.
No. So look carefully at the way it's spelled. And when I tell
It's an ayin, not an aleph.
exactly, Elokim here.
Is an Aleph.
Yael is Yud Ein Lamed. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Elokim is with an aleph.
Yeah, I realized. I didn't see
Okay,
it.
like Bet El. So add a hey at the end. Add a hey at the end. What word does that make?
Going up.
Going up. Ya'aleh, right? La'alot.
Yeah.
Aliyah, making an aliyah.
Hmm.
It comes from the name of increasing, getting bigger, going up, ascending, building towards something. It has. Whereas, what happens with the barak? What's the direction of barak?
Down.
Starting
Coming
on
down.
top, starting on top and coming down. That's visually,
Right.
even though sometimes it's a cross, whatever. But it's visually when somebody draws it, it's coming from the heavens and hitting the ground. In other words, it's the wrong direction. It's starting from a point of strength and going downwards. Where Yael is exactly the opposite. Yael is somewhere where you're continuing, where no matter where you're at what stage in life, you're going up, you're ascending, you're always moving upwards, you're moving in the proper direction. So there are many allusions here in terms of, you know, how they interplay, whether it's meant to be or not, whether we're bringing meaning to it, fine. But you see that almost unfolding, and you will see actually later on in next week with a song of its of the beauty of it, and again what each player means in this entire story. So I hope that I hope that gives you a little bit. But you're right, it's not like it was just a one-time story, and that perhaps why Yael later on doesn't, you know, there's no other stories, etc., because that's what she needed to do in terms of history. That was her contribution at that time. But her contribution is endless in the fact that she's, you know, her essence, her strength has lent that name to be used
She
ever
was
since.
first liberated woman.
Yeah, and this is so as we mentioned, Miriam is the first Nevi'ah. Miriam explicitly also in Shirat Hayam. Miriam Hanavi'ah. Miriam, the prophetess, takes Tupim Be'adah, she takes all the, you know, symbols in her hands, etc., and she sings with the women, but it's explicitly where Hanavi'ah, and this is the first time as well, Dvorah. We have two heroines. We have Dvorah, and we also have Yael. And by the way, how many years, do you remember we were talking about last year, last week, I believe it was Michael who mentioned that number. Otniel was there for 40 years. Ehud was there for 80 years, which is a multiple of what number?
Multiple of 40.
40 again, 20 years. Guess how many years Dvorah was?
Was that?
Guess how many years Dvorah reigned for or led the Israelites?
20. Oh, 40.
40
Okay.
years. Yeah. So there's definitely that kind of and how many years were the Israelites in the desert?
40.
40.
There is that kind of, that 40 is I don't want to say magical number because it's not in terms of, but there's a spiritual connection with that number, and you will see it. It's actually going to be up again. If that number doesn't end, it comes up again with another shofet, with another judge. So there's a lot of reading in between and
Fascinating.
those little details, which is quite
There are no stupid women in the Tanakh that I could think of. Most of them use their feminine wiles to do well.
I think actually, if you look at you said something very, 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 very interesting. If you look at the women, they're not, sometimes even when they're trying to get their feminine side, it's balanced off with another side of strength or another side of foresight. Sometimes
Right.
that the male counterpart doesn't quite see, and you see that quite often. The Jewish women or the women in the Tanakh are quite assertive. They're not these little docile women who are bossed or however you want to look at it. And it starts, by the way, from Chava. It's Chava kind of. It seems almost like Chava is,
Right.
I don't want to say bossing Adam around, but she knows how to press his buttons.
That's,
if,
yeah.
if you want to say it. And throughout the Tanakh, you're absolutely right. I think the sad part is, when women are portrayed as, the quiet, unimportant. They don't play a big role. They don't, what do they do? Yeah, of course they need to childbear and bring up the kids. That's important, and cook in the kitchen, because that's, we need that. That's an important thing. They play a much bigger hand than just that traditional, if you want to say, oh, in the olden days. If you break it down, women were an integral part of Jewish experience by far, very, very important. And the Torah is unabashed about it. It's not like we're keeping, the separate. Yes, we had different roles to begin with, and even today, different people, we do have different roles to play, but it wasn't as segregated, so to speak, or as delineated as we think in terms of, kitchen and women marry, and that's it. They don't do anything else, and they keep their, whatever their husband says, they keep their mouth shut. They don't talk back to the husband. They don't have suggestions. They can't think for themselves.
Oh,
Exactly. It's exactly the opposite. We see women that, listen, Dvorah ostracizes Barak. And if Barak is an army person, if she asks him to lead an army of 10,000, this is no yachts. This is not somebody who's never done this before. He's obviously has some kind of charisma, being able to empower 10,000 people. And she basically talks to him like a little kid. You're a coward. Think of the empowerment we have. And I think of her, and she almost reminds me of somebody like Golda Meir, like this is a smaller woman, and she takes her finger and pokes it into your face and tells you exactly the way it is. And think about it, we've had a prime minister in Israel before almost all the other Western countries. Think about it. It's in history. That can't tell you it didn't happen. That's it's when was the first Canadian? She wasn't voted in. It's only because he stepped down that she took over. Thatcher was really the first female prime minister of the, how do you call it, of the modern world in terms of the Western.
Well, maybe Israel's waiting for another woman. It's time.
Could be, but I'm saying it's amazing, and this is before. I mean, women's, was kicking women's. They don't know. They picked somebody who was strong, somebody who was fortitude, and she had it. Yes, there are traditionally, avenues of women and avenues that men went, but by and large, it didn't exclude from those women that needed to. That had had that ability to go. But nobody stopped them because they were a woman. As on the contrary, they were encouraged because she had that strength, and she was leading for 40 years, not less than Otniel and other, and she was amongst it was the second highest. Only Ehud was the one who had was in, how do you call it? He was a shofet for 80 years. Everybody else, the second highest was 40 years. And then everybody else was less. So she was an equal to the second most in terms of her leadership role.
Tzipi Livni could have been a prime minister.
Yeah.
Most of her time.
Yeah. Listen, there's not that far off. Again, doesn't depending on and I don't want to go to politics, but there are quite a few very, very powerful women in Israeli politics even today. Whether they're going to win or not, the way that the politics sphere is shaped, it's almost like yesterday Lahavdil was the Super Bowl. There's 36 teams, yes, you know which ones are the strongest ones, but you never quite see. Yeah, at the end of the season, you can say, I knew they were going to win. But if you were, if you had to put down $1,000 or whatever, or money, you'd be like, I'm not so sure. I'm not so it's not 100%. There's 30 some odd teams vying for the top, and it's the same thing in Israel. You have all these parties, etc. And sometimes it's just and as well, who's going to make deals, etc. So it's not that clear, but there are quite a few very, very powerful and rightfully so women that are in Jewish politics. And I'm not talking about just candidates or that they have a seat or writing, but that are major players, that are heads of different miflagot, of different groups. So it's rightfully so.
Some are troublemakers.
100%. Listen, that's okay. You also keep us at bay, so that's all right.
Yeah.
Listen, you can't have the yin without the yang. You can't have the yang without the yin. So it's so we need both. We need both in order to move forward, which is beautiful. Any questions, by the way?
All good.
Anybody's good?
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Very
Thank you.
good.
Thank you, everyone. Did everybody receive a notice? I just want to make sure.
Not me.
Yes.
Yes.
I kept the one from last week that Farla sent me, but I didn't get one.
You did it?
No, I used the one you had last